Okay, from this problem, we're going to go ahead and do a plan comparison in SPSS. But let's real quickly look at which of the groups we're going to compare. So the first one says she's going to predict the subjects getting the drug. So that's the low dose, medium dose, and high dose. Differs from the ones not getting a drug. So our first comparison is going to be the placebo group versus these three groups lumped as one giant group. That's our first comparison. The second comparison is going to be the medium versus the low. So our second comparison is going to be the low dose versus the medium dose. And the last prediction is high versus medium. So it's going to be these two. So to recap, the first comparison is going to be the placebo against these three as one giant group. The second one is going to be the low versus the medium. And the last one is going to be the medium versus the high. And like always, plan comparisons, we do that before we run the ANOVA. This is what we're specifically looking at. The difference between plan comparisons and post hoc tests, or with plan comparisons, you know ahead of time which groups you're going to compare, and a post hoc test will basically make every possible comparison that there is. So that's not what we want to do. So let me go ahead and put this in SPSS, please hold. So after putting the data in SPSS, pretty soon I'm going to quit doing this basic stuff. I'm going to assume you know how to put a variable in. And with the ANOVA, I insist that you call the first one group until you know that with ANOVAs, all your IVs have to be grouping variables, categorical variables, or nominal. And make sure you identify them as nominal, scale, or whatever it is. Okay, so we got the data inputted. So since group was an IV of categorical nature, we had to label them all. So I just gave the numbers accordingly: 1 placebo, 2 low, 3 medium, 4 high. I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet and label them. All right, that's group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. So I entered that. Likewise here. Okay, so here's our data view. So these are all the people in group 1, group 2, etc., etc. Okay, so we're ready to go. To do our plan comparisons, we go to Analyze. Compare means. One way ANOVA. Okay, our dependent list is our COG scores, right? That's our scale. And our grouping variable is which dosage they got. So I'm going to go to options first. And I want the descriptives, homogeneity of variance, and why not? The means plots, why not? Now here comes the comparison part, okay? So contrasts, it's asking for the coefficients. So let me show you what that means. So the first comparison is the no drug, the placebo group, versus all three of these. So the coefficients, that's the number you have to plug in where they signify what's being compared to what. So since there are three groups, subgroups in this new groups, I'm gonna go ahead and label those. The coefficients is -1, -1, -1 for each group, and for the control group, I'm going to be 3. Okay, so the coefficients always have to sum to 0 in a plan comparison. So that tells you, you're looking at the numbers, that tells you that you're going to compare this group to these groups as one big group. Okay, so let me, again, if you really need to see this, please watch the by hand video that our darling Christina made. It should be on the same page. But let me go ahead and show you how to do this in SPSS. So back in SPSS, contrast, that's the same as a plan comparison. These guys must be English or something. But we're going to go ahead and our coefficients are going to be 3, -1, -1, -1. So the computer's going to do the rest, okay? So that's our first comparison. We can do them all comparisons at the same time. So let's do the next one, okay? So the next comparison was, I already forgot, please hold. So it's medium versus low. So I'm going to show you what that looks like on our Excel sheet again real quick. So we're just doing medium versus low. Okay, so here's low. If I make that 1, and then the median, I got to make its opposite, -1. Remember, they must sum to 0. So the placebo gets a big old 0, and so does the high dose, 0. Those are going to be our coefficients for the planned comparison of the low dose group versus the medium dose group. So let me put them in SPSS. Remember, planned comparisons is contrasts, and we're going to do 0, add, 1, add, -1, add, and 0, add. Okay, continue. I'm pretty sure the last one was the medium dose versus the high dose. So let me go ahead and plug those in. Right on our spreadsheet, it's going to look like this. The medium dose is going to be a 1, and the high dose is going to be a -2, a -1, okay? These numbers are arbitrary. I could have stuck in 2 and -2. I could have stuck in 19 and -19, as long as they sum to 0. Okay, so we're not involving the placebo group or the low dose group in this last comparison. So these are going to be our coefficients. Back to SPSS. Contrast, get it right. We're going to do the next one. So placebo gets a 0 coefficient. Low gets a 0 coefficient. Medium gets a 1. And high gets a -1. Don't make mistakes. So that you got to add that. Okay, so now everybody's in there. We're ready to go. Continue. And so we have set up SPSS. Let us hit the OK button. Cross your fingers. Interpretation time. So the first box from your one-way ANOVA from planned comparisons is your descriptive statistics. So it shows you the mean COG scores of each of the groups, your standard deviations. Remember, this is the data you need to put into your APA formatting. And it gives you confidence interval. You really don't need it, and a minimum and a maximum. Here is your test for homogeneity of variance, the Levine's test. It has not been violated. Remember, if this sig number was less than 0.05, then you would have trouble, but you were good to go. Here's your Anova Table between groups, within groups. You got a F score, an F ratio of about 11. That's pretty darn big. And it's going to give you a very, very small significance, less than 0.05. So there is a significant difference between the treatment groups, the drug groups, which we kind of knew was going to happen anyway. That's why we did the planned comparison. So this box, this contrast coefficient box, this box right there, this spells out each of your contrasts. So the first one we did, right, the placebo versus all three. The second one, the placebo is not involved, the high is not involved, but it's going to be the low versus the medium. And the last one is going to be the medium versus the high. So pretty easy. But now what it did basically is run individual t-tests. So for COG scores, okay, so for contrast number 1, the control group against everybody else, they got a big T. There's a significant difference, okay? So I'll say that again. There's a significant difference in our first comparison where it was the placebo group versus all the other drug groups. Significant difference in COG scores. Comparison number 2, which was between the low and the medium amount of the drug, there was no significant difference, right? A real tiny t-score, a giant sig. So there was no significant difference between the low and the median groups. And the last one was the medium and the high. Comparison number 3, and yes, again, there was a significant difference between the medium and the high. So that's how you read these things. You can look at the mean plots, I guess, if you want to. But here's the different, right? There's the placebo, low, medium, and high. And these are their COG scores. So you can see that the drug does affect people's COG scores the more they get, except for between low and medium for some strange reason. But that's it. Planned comparisons. Again, if you want to see this in detail, how it's done by hand, please watch the video with StatMaster C. MGZ, out.